This time around, we're going to stop for a moment and take a look at some stereo recording techniques. So when we talk about recording in stereo, we're really talking about trying to pick up a sound signal that is going to reflect the span from left to right of what is in front of us. We're trying to capture the sound that's kind of like the left to right image, but in sound of a performance of some sort, right? And so what we're usually trying to do is obviously taking more than one microphone to do it, or more than one element recording at the same time to do this. And so we're going to get into a couple of the different common approaches to it during this particular video. Let's go ahead and switch over real quick to the PowerPoint. So this is about stereo techniques for recording, and we have a variety of options to start things off. So here's a quick overview of the different kinds of microphone positions that are available. So we've got, starting off the top, we've got this idea of the XY pattern. It's a mixture of two cardioid microphones. Each of them is set up in such a way that the elements are on top of one another. And so that means they occupy basically the same space, except one is pointing to the left area in front of it, and one is pointing to the right area in front of it. And together they pick up the range from left to right and gives us a stereo space that we can hear when we put on headphones or we listen in speakers. The things that we would look at and see on the right-hand side are things we will hear in our right ear. Same thing for the things in the left-hand side. And so this is an XY, also called the coincident pair, because both of the microphones are in the same location. They're coincident as far as the elements are concerned. So then we have two approaches that are near coincident, meaning the microphones are in the same space, but the elements are not in the same exact spot, and they're angled away from one another. So the French version, the ORTF, near coincident, has a 110-degree angle between the two microphones, whereas the Dutch narrow it, and they use the two cardioid microphones, but they bring them more closely together. They have a 90-degree angle between the two. We also have the MS system mic, which is middle and side, and that has two mics but not two cardioid mics as we've seen in the previous three. What it has is one cardioid mic and a bidirectional mic. So the bidirectional mic is picking up the sounds from the sides, left and right, and the cardioid is being used to pick up the front in the middle. So among the three pickup patterns that we get, or the pickup areas that we get, we've got a really wide stereo sense of space. And this middle side technique is one that was very popular for classical recording, or recording in spaces where the mix is being done by the performers and you want to capture a sense of that hall that they're in. So it's something that works really well with classical music and with choral music, things where you can control quite a bit and you're really trying to capture the feeling of the space as well as the performance that's mixed. The final one is the spaced cardioids or spaced omnis. We often think about of them as spaced omnis. We just take two cardioid or two omnidirectional microphones and we put them out in the space facing either the audience, if we want to capture the audience, or the stage, if we're trying to capture a sense of what's happening in a performance on a stage. So those are our basic approaches to stereo. And when we're doing this, I'm going to switch things back really quickly off the PowerPoint because I've got a couple of tools here that we use for our stereo techniques. So the first one is what we call here as a stereo bar. This one is a little bit different from some of them. Sometimes you'll see that they're stationary, they're just straight. This one has a little more adjusting capability to it. So you end up screwing it onto the mic stand, and then we have these two screws here that allow us to attach the microphones to it. And so the space bar, or the stereo bar, is very common if we're trying to set up a microphone system to record in a sense of space. Maybe the audience, perhaps, or a performer. I've got one set up here so that you can take a look at it. This is going to be, whoops, sorry about that. This is the setup where we've got two microphones. We usually have them so that they're exactly the same. In this case, we've got the Shure SM57s that we've put on here. And so when we are working with the coincident pair, we're going to be setting them up so that the elements are right on top of one another. So you would set them up like this, and so this microphone here is going to be picking up in that direction. This microphone here is going to pick up in this direction. And so between the two of them, once we get it set up properly, between the two of them we can get a pretty good left and right image, but it's a narrow one. And so that's why there were some other options that have been chosen over time in order to make it possible for you to get a wider stereo pickup pattern. And so the XY is going to be a narrow but also really good with phase. We talked about phase before. And if the two elements are in exactly the same space, then what we end up having is no problems with phase issues, because this is a little bit tight on here, because then we can have this signal getting to the two elements at exactly the same time. So we're not worried about there being a phase problem. So once again, if we take a look at it, we've got the microphone set up. We would set up our coincident pair so that our heads on the microphones, the elements are occupying basically the same space. It's pointing out to our audience or our stage, depending on what we're trying to record. If we switch then and try to set it up so that we can have either the French near coincident or the Dutch, we would go ahead and adjust this microphone setup such that the heads or the elements are pointing away from each other, but not perfectly away. And there we go. Got to tighten up the screw on this microphone clip. So here we would have an opportunity to adjust it so that there were 110 degrees, or we could narrow it so that it's more of a 90-degree angle. And again, we're going to be pointing this microphone on a stand toward either the stage or the audience, whatever it is we're trying to pick up, using the stereo setup. Then, of course, if we wanted to do spaced cardioids, we would just go ahead and take our microphones and we would just have two mics, like two setup 57s, and we would put them into two different locations facing the stage or facing the audience, and so they would be spaced cardioids, or we can have omnis and use spaced omnis. So that's something that we'll have a chance to play with and work with in a lab session, but I wanted to give you a little bit better idea of what that looks like, hopefully, in this scenario. So that's our stereo approaches. Our system mic is a little different. As we mentioned before, the system mic uses the bidirectional mic. In this case, this one is a bidirectional mic, so it's picking up on this side and on the other side that's facing away from us. And then this cardioid is picking up right here in front. What they're trying to show here is the green dots are the bidirectional pickup pattern, and then we've got the blue, which is going to be the middle microphone picking up straight in the center. So you're getting a full array of stereo sound from left to right. Generally, we use a pattern box to mix that with, because the bidirectional comes to the console as a mono signal, and we have to split it to make it, to get the true left and right for mixing. So that's something that we end up using this pattern switch, or we can adapt our audio programs like Audition to accommodate that middle side kind of pattern box. So that's the middle side system. So there we have our approaches to stereo.